just as kind of like an overview of our guest today. All right, everyone, it's officially 11:17, which is apparently my lucky number for kicking off the AMAs. Thanks so much for joining us this week. We've got an exciting one for you in store. For those who are just tuning in or haven't been keeping up with us this week's AMA is all on the Identity Litepaper, which we dropped for a community preview on Monday and to the public on Wednesday. So far, it looks like over 1,000 people have gotten their first look batches for their paper. We also got in over 500 questions from the community this week on the latest publication. So just as kind of like an overview of our guest today we're here with Mario Yaksetig. He's an L1 engineer and he's the lead author of our paper, as well as Will Carter, who's LAMINA1 CTO. And we're basically going to be taking this session, the next sort of 45 minutes or so, to address some of the biggest and most important and common questions and feedback that we got about the paper. And I also kind of wanted to note that before we kick off, thank you all so much for your feedback and inputs this week. We've been reading through all of them. Mario and I and Will and I have been, kind of going back and forth on certain comments, and I'm excited to announce, already planning sort of a deeper dive into the paper, thanks to pokes and inputs from a ton of you guys on things like cryptography, the ethical considerations. We got a couple of callouts on our nomenclature around rug pulling and mnemonic key phrases that we're definitely looking into. So again, thank you all so much for your inputs. We're reading all of them, and super good fodders for sort of like further developments into our identity strategy and future publications. But I guess to kind of kick off, Mario, if you just wanted to like say hi to the community and just kind of, before we kind of dive into community questions, I'd love to just get you to kind of set us up. What is the Identity Litepaper and what were its goals when you set out to write it about a month ago?
Thank you. Yeah, so first of all, thanks to everyone. You may not believe it, but we actually read every single comment, feedback, question that we get, and it has been definitely a bit overwhelming to digest all of that, all of the good comments and like suggestions that we've received from the community. So for us, our goal with the Identity Light paper was literally to make it light. So we kind of wanted to be like, all right, guys, we know what's going on. We've been doing a lot of research into what the space is, how things are working. But we just kind of want to give like a little light overview of the entire landscape. And the community did not disappoint. They were like, we want more. So Casey already spilled the beans. We are going to have the extended 2.0 version where we're going to go all out and look at the specific cryptography that is used, what are the trade-offs, maybe even dive pretty technically into the zero knowledge schemes that are used in the space, which is something that I kind of wanted to do from the start, but we wanted to start like also very lightly. So that was basically it. I think that's a perfect setup for everyone to kind of understand where we are, what we're going to release.
Amazing. Yeah. And another kind of follow-up question before we dive into the community questions is, why write and release this paper now? I mean, identity obviously is a huge topic within the sort of like Web3 and metaverse conversation, but why did we want to dive into this now, sort of as Lamina1 on the sort of precipice between testnet and betanet?
I think the most important part was to give a setup for the whole, like all what is behind identity. So identity is a very complex space. It can get very technically very quickly, and we just wanted to basically compress all the information that we think is very important and allow everyone to, oh, I'm not really like very familiar with how things work, and we can like fast track all of that onboarding, be like, oh, here's a quick light paper that we developed, go through this and you should be able to now fast forward literally weeks of reading at least. And regarding our current development, it does say that we're looking at things very thoroughly. We're looking at what's out there, what are the best things we can bring to the community and L1.
Amazing. So yeah, I'm gonna jump into a bunch of community questions. We've got a lot to go through, and I want to make sure that we can get to as many questions as we possibly can. So just to start out, some top line ones. We got one from Sherbert0123 who asks, what are the key features or innovations proposed in Lamina1's light paper that differentiate our approach to identity management from existing solutions in the market? What makes this paper different?
So I will say that what makes us different in general is that we want to bring the best experience to the users, and that is something that you not don't necessarily find in other places. And looking at the identity space, everyone kind of just wanted to claim a piece of the cake for themselves, and it's very hard. You look at the stuff that is out there, and it seems to be mostly platform oriented rather than user oriented, which I don't think makes a lot of sense because at the end of the day, the users will all the identity will revolve around the users, not so much on the platform itself. So everything we do at L1 and very concretely with the identity approach revolves around having an amazing experience for the users.
Amazing. And I guess to kind of follow up on that, like the kind of point of the paper wasn't necessarily for us to be, publishing a new sort of identity solution that's never been, discovered before, right, Mario? It was more about like evaluating what's out there in the current state of the industry, correct?
Exactly, yeah. And just to kind of show how deep we went into this, we literally went through the code and math of like very specific projects. We actually reached out to their teams, asking how, clarifying some questions, maybe even suggesting some improvements. So it was just more kind of like a due diligence and review of what is out there. The purpose of this paper concretely wasn't really to give like a formal new novel approach to identity.
Totally. Yeah, that actually answers a question from Samale2182 who asked, how do you evaluate your prospects for identity solutions in this paper? Obviously it sounds like you went a lot through like the sort of math and code in addition to, the promises they were making, right?
Yeah, and absolutely, yeah. That's basically the short story. I'll just say that one of the things that was a bit disappointing is that I didn't see a lot of collaboration between the different projects, and
Mm.
I feel like at the end of the day, we all want the same thing or should want the same thing, and it's a very fragmented space. And I don't think that trend is going to stop anytime soon, as bad as that may sound. I think more and more identity projects based on Vue, different solutions will appear, which will only make the user's life harder.
Yeah, yeah. We got a question from Ray, we got a couple of questions sort of around the difference between or it's sort of the debate between, do we have multiple identities in the metaverse or Web3, or should we have a single identity? So Ray asks, how can we create systems that authenticate users well, while also letting them have personalized and anonymous identities as well? I think there's a big sort of trend within our community with the survey data that we pointed out, and I think with a lot of people's feedback, that like people kind of they understand the importance of being able to prove who you are, for like safety, security, authentication reasons, but then there's also a lot of value in being able to have multiple personas and identities or maintain anonymity in certain spaces. So how are you kind of thinking about that, Mario?
That is probably one of the most controversial topics in identity because on one side you do want to authenticate people and like make sure that they are someone like an actual person or someone who has the ability to perform a specific action. But at the same time, we do want to ensure that anyone can like easily create a pseudonym and do like specific actions on a social media, for example. The way I see this is almost like a dual of the blue check mark, right? So you would have a verifiable, like a verified identity or a specific credential, and that is like your blue check mark, right? And that gives you specific benefits, specific accesses, like you kind of have a different level of accesses and privileges. And then if you want to do a personalized or anonymous identity, you can also do that, but it may be limited in some extent. So I will say one thing though, for anonymity, we do focus a lot on having very usable zero knowledge proofs. So the ability to prove that you can perform a specific action and not really reveal who you are, that is something that we look at very, very seriously.
Yeah, sort of related to that, Yoshi Berloni asks, is there a place for a mutable identity online? And sort of as following up from that, should that immutable identity be decentralized or dependent on a central authority like a government?
So here I'd like to touch on one thing. I do think at the end of the day, all the identities are going to be immutable in the sense that there will be a trace of the issuance, but not necessarily that it cannot be changed, right? So if I issue, like if I get issued a passport today, maybe that passport expires next year. So then a year from now, there is a new issuance that kind of revokes my previous one on chain. So like the issuance itself is immutable. Like there's no way we can change that, but we can update the record, right? And this is often very important. You can think of like as an individual like grows older, right? So if you are 16 and a passport for a 16-year-old versus the same passport for that same person at age 30, it's fairly different because you may even have like a different address, different citizenship. So stuff actually changes. So I do think the issuance and like the tracking will be immutable in that sense, but the upgrades and stuff like it should be updatable. And regarding if it should be decentralized or dependent on a central authority, I do think it's a both approach, not really one or the other, because at the end of the day, we will always have an issuer. And in some cases, the issuer of an identity will be the user itself. And in other cases, like I'm just going to use the passport example again, it may very well be a government, right? So they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, definitely. We also got a bunch of questions around like authentication challenges, to sort of like build off of that need for being able to prove who you are at any point. So Skadag asks, how will it be possible to distinguish real people in the metaverse from artificial intelligence? Just to kick us off with a nice tricky problem that I know that a ton of our community members are thinking about right now.
This is definitely a very, very interesting issue. And let me just be clear, I'm not going to give a solution to this problem right now. But I will say this. Internally, we have been talking a lot about, so right now on the internet, we have CAPTCHAs, right? So you go on a website, sometimes the website needs to double check if you're a bot or a person, and they give you a little challenge. In this case, it's commonly referred to as a CAPTCHA, which is like completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart, something along those lines. And we have been talking about what would a CAPTCHA look like in the metaverse. And once you start thinking about that, I'll even leave that to the community. Once you start thinking about that, it becomes a very interesting and philosophical question, right? So what are you going to be able to do in the metaverse that a bot or an AI or an unplayable character that is powered by AI cannot do, right? And you find yourself coming with a lot of very interesting ideas, and like it will be a very big paradigm shift of how things work.
Yeah, Narayan7 asks, how do you see fighting with things like bots and sybils?
Yeah, so this is it, basically just piggybacking on my previous answer. So this is a big issue. Usually, the lowest hanging fruit, something that is turns out to be quite effective, is you can just force users to solve a specific challenge. So just like to access a specific experience, you can have like specific challenges, not necessarily CAPTCHAs, but there's a lot of things you can do. So I'll refer to the civil example. There's a lot of anti-civil mechanisms, right? Every single consensus protocol on every single blockchain has to use an anti-civil mechanism. So when you hear proof of something, whether it's work, stake, delegated proof of stake, whatever that proof of is, that is how they are addressing the civil issue, right? And that is a whole. I think I could have an AMA just just on anti-civils, but I'll leave it at that, and I think that
I'll flag
that
that
helps a
one
lot.
for later on. I think we got a ton of questions even for like our previous AMA on Sybils that we didn't get to. So yeah, definitely keeping that in mind. Nastya Yannick, on the topic of authentication, also called out biometric authentication. So they asked, it's interesting to learn more about how you plan to deal with skeptics of biometric authentication. And I think there will be many. And I know we called this out in the white paper in general, biometric authentication is very user-friendly, right? But a large part of our community, we found through surveying as part of this identity initiative, is deeply uncomfortable with a lot of biometrics sort of like authentication methodologies. So I'd love to hear kind of like what your sort of your response to that, Mario, both was when writing the paper and, what our sort of plans are or how we're thinking about, that kind of backlash as we're building out identity solutions and things on Lamina1.
So as we were writing the paper, something very interesting, because we had the results from the survey, was if you look at the space itself, a lot of apps and ecosystems are converging towards this notion of using biometric to authenticate users or wallets or just to simplify key management, right? And you would expect the survey results to reflect that. So you would expect people in the surveys to be like, yeah, we love biometrics. That's why like everyone is doing it. And then we got the biometric survey results and it was completely unexpected because people were actually like, nah, we don't actually want that. And that was very eye-opening. I'm personally on that side of things as well. So I believe biometrics should be a supplement to things. So a supplement to key management or a supplement to how you store keys. So if you actually have a key that is stored somewhere, then you can use biometrics to access that specific key, but not necessarily use biometrics as the source of generating wallets and that. And I think there's a very big distinction there, and that should be highlighted. So we are seeing biometrics as a supplement to things, not as a foundation for keys, if that makes sense.
Yeah, amazing. And Jacko Girl, this is our last authentication question before we move on to another topic, but Jacko Girl 7 asks, how's the Lamina1 team thinking about what happens when someone loses control of their digital identity?
So this was probably one of the questions that sparked my interest the most, because as we were looking at identity solutions in the space, we looked that rarely projects address the issue of revoking credentials. And when they did, they mostly looked at it from the issuer side. So no one really worries about, oh, what if a user loses their key? Or what if a user gets hacked and someone else has that key? And that is a big issue. And we are actually, spoiler there, we are actually working on that. And I'll even put the problem in a more interesting context. So say you have a wallet and that wallet gets hacked. So someone gets access to your key. In the digital world, both the hacker and yourself become the same person because people are distinguished by the wallet address, and both parties have access to the keys. So both of them can sign stuff and they can be like, no, I'm the actual owner. I'm the actual owner. So there has to be a way to deal with this type of issue. And what we have been exploring, and we even Will and I have been doing this for a while now, is this notion of fallback keys. So you would have almost like a ring the alarm key hidden inside your wallet. So when you generate a wallet, you generate an extra key. You can keep that in your drawer. You can do whatever you want to keep it safe, and then just use your regular wallet key, your secret key, to do whatever you want. And then if that wallet gets compromised, then you're actually able to prove that you are the true owner, and you can like literally revoke that wallet. This is very relevant for it provides a mechanism that is very dual to what exists already in the world, right? So if someone steals your credit card, ideally you want to have the ability to like void that credit card as soon as possible. And right now, if that happens to your wallet, there is no way to do it. And we have a solution for that.
Wow, super interesting. I did not even know that level of detail. That's super exciting. Next up, I want to go into a couple of questions about sort of user onboarding and account creation. So one of the things that we talk about in the white paper and sort of talk about as a potential solution for user onboarding is single sign-on, or SSO. And Olga7 asks, what benefits can users expect from extending single sign-on capabilities beyond a single platform and enabling interoperability within a wider ecosystem?
One thing that we are looking at, and you should hear from us, you community should hear very good updates very, very soon, is we are looking at the ability of bringing some of your identity elements from Web 2 to your own Web 3 wallet. So using single sign-on capabilities, we will be leveraging that to basically extract you will have the ability to bring a piece of you, say something you have on your social media, and export that onto your actual Web3, let's call it, profile. Obviously that is purely optional, so then you can always, this is always everything we talk about in this, both the paper and like identity related, it's always optional, so users optionally can do specific things. So for example, for me, I would love to, and maybe I'll do a little spoiler here, I would love to be able to bring one specific username that I have and that I like to claim onto the L1 ecosystem, right? And then maybe have other pseudonym wallets. And so we are trying to leverage the best we can from single sign-on capabilities, because right now we do know that a big issue with Web3 in general is both usability. So stuff is already kind of hard, even for tech-savvy people. And only recently you kind of see the latest trends of bringing these single sign-on capabilities onto this realm. So we are very much focused on bringing that and bringing the best we can from that realm.
Mm-hmm.
Could I build on that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely that side of the equation, which is like making sure that we can adopt some of those really smooth user experience interfaces that Web 2 has kind of gotten us all accustomed with, which is like particularly important in the Web 3 space, because unlike a lot of kind of Web 2 applications, the Web 3 space, while exciting, has, you know, uniquely challenging onboarding processes. So that's one way we plan to leverage this SSO, not only like bringing your Web 2 identity into a wallet, but generally speaking, when you create a wallet in the LAMINA1 ecosystem, whether it's with a Web 2 identity or not, you now gain access to a new type of SSO, which is a Web 3 SSO. And that's important because that's an SSO that you actually control. So unlike this, you know, web of trust that you're building currently in Web 2, where you're using, you know, your Facebook ID, for example, to log into every new platform that you onboard onto, you don't actually own that identity. That's an identity that Facebook basically leases to you. And at any point they could revoke that. And the issue with that is, you know, if they do revoke it for whatever reason, or even if it's compromised, then you lose access to all of those platforms that you've onboarded onto with that SSO. So I think like this, it introduces, yeah, like there is the user experience side of it, but there's also kind of like a security and web of trust aspect of it, where like, do you want to go through not only the metaverse, but your entire online life, basically establishing your identity as Google user, you know, ABCD, or do you want to hold those keys yourself and basically maintain custodianship of your identity, especially as, you know, more and more services and more of our life becomes digital. I think it's going to be like really important and compelling for people to control their own identities and that SSO aspect of it. So that's something we're taking seriously, and I think is going to be powerful, you know, beyond just metaverse experiences and like extending throughout, you know, everything we do online.
Yeah, amazing. Nobody in particular 4778 asks, how much will L1 use existing wallet technology versus proprietary technology for identifying and onboarding metaverse users in the future?
That's a pretty funny username because I actually thought you were saying nobody in particular, and then you're actually going to say a sentence. I think Will already covered a lot of that. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So the best things that already exist, especially in the wallet space, that's what we want to use. Although I will say one thing, a lot of recent developments in the blockchain space in general are forcing users to even have more key management. So now they have to keep track of the regular wallet and then another wallet that they use to transact in like a specific ecosystem or to do other actions. We don't want that type of complexity at all. Like key management in its simplicity is already pretty hard in the Web3 space, let alone if you start adding more and more keys. So we don't want to have proprietary technology because first, everything we do is for the public. And if we do it, it's to improve the space in general. And so we will use existing wallet technology, but the best wallet technology. And we won't really make people's lives harder than what it should be.
Definitely. And Alexander 1976 in Ex Jupiter asked, is LAMINA1 working on account abstraction? I assume so, but can you give us more detail? What's going on in that sort of world?
Will, I don't know if you want to take that one because we do talk a lot about account abstraction, but I'll just say this. We are looking very closely at account abstraction and how we can take the best advantage of actually enforcing specific rules in either for wallets or for identity, right? So account abstraction is basically just allowing any user to decide specific set of rules to perform like an action. So like, let's say, very concrete example, I don't want to use the traditional signature scheme to send funds from my wallet to another wallet. And so I basically define a new set of rules. But I get to choose that. That is very powerful. And because it literally gives users control, so you can then create systems around social recovery. So, all right, what if I lose my key? Then maybe I can have a way for someone else or a group of people to use my funds and send them back to me, hopefully. And we are doing a lot of work here. We're going to have a lot of development, and you will see a lot of this happening in the L1 things that we're building.
Another topic that our community really focused in on, I think we probably got like 15 to 20 questions about SBTs or soulbound tokens. This was like a really big area of interest from our community after publishing the paper. So just to start, Ephysio, Monte Crypto, and others, basically like, let's just start with an overview. What are SBTs or soulbound tokens? What are their purpose? And like, how do they work? Mario, can you just give like a quick overview? We just got a bunch of people being like, wait, SBTs are interesting, but what are they again?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start, let's take a step back and start with NFTs, right? So recently we've been seeing the NFT boom where a specific wallet can have an NFT and that almost acts like a voucher that allows someone to do something, or say if you can have real world assets wrapped on an NFT. So you can actually have an NFT that gives you right to an ounce of gold, or you can have an NFT. Usually you see that a lot on the internet is more for digital art, right? So you are the true owner of a specific piece of digital art. Those are transferable though, right? So say I am a big fan of a specific band and every time they release a new album, I am the first one that buys it. So they can give me an NFT, be like, oh, here you go, you have a top badge, top fan. But then I can sell that, right? So if then they start being like, oh, you can use this NFT to access our next festival for free. And if I can't go, I can actually sell that NFT and that someone else can go and use it. Soulbound tokens try to address this issue like differently. So a soulbound token is a token that stays with the wallet. It's literally bound to the soul of a wallet. And it is very powerful because you can think of it like, imagine your college degree, right? So you don't want people to have the ability to sell their college degrees left and right and transact with those assets. So you want that to be associated with a specific individual. So that is the purpose of soulbound tokens. They currently don't have many like real world deployments, but I have met already deans of universities that are issuing college degrees. I think it was either a year ago or maybe even 2 years ago. They're already issuing soulbound tokens as college degrees, and very well-known universities in the UK.
Interesting. Yeah. Moker4660 called out, a discussion on the potential flaws of using SBTs to verify identity. For example, they called out, when a user's passphrase is compromised would also be appreciated. So I know you just kind of like went over what SBTs are and the potential use cases for them, but what are the potential flaws or sort of challenges in using SBTs in this way?
Yeah, I'll even take it a step further. Like at some point, I wouldn't be surprised, and this is already seen out there, that, okay, so now you have a token that is bonded to your wallet. So people just actually sell their secret key, right? So they go like, oh, I have this specific wallet, and they just sell the secret key. And that right now is kind of like an issue that is out of everyone's hands, and it will. I don't think it has happened enough for people to start seriously addressing that. Although it's already happening a bit. I'm not going to name names, but you can find this online. I will say though that if a user passphrase is compromised, this is very dual to the problem I was just talking about earlier, and that notion of the secure fallback. You can even make that quantum secure. So even if, say, 20 years from now, someone appears, they have access to a quantum computer and they're able to break your key, using our technology, you are still able to prove that you are the real owner of that wallet. So this is still not the fallbacks, but SBTs are very new. They will need to go through some revisions. It's very powerful technology. I do like the notion of having specific credentials that stay with you, as opposed to like you having the ability to just sell them. And that would be a little edge case that we address with that notion of fallbacks.
Last question on SBTs. Subham asks, what's a good reference on soulbound tokens if, I wanted to go into more detail or to look into if you're interested in this?
So this notion of SBTs or soulbound tokens actually comes from a paper. The paper, we can publish the link to it on Discord, but the paper's title is called Decentralized Society, Finding Web3 Soul. And one of the authors is Vitalik from like the creator of Ethereum, right? So it should be very easy to find, but again, we can easily post it if people want to read more about like the full detailed spec of this. That is the original reference and where they come from.
Amazing. Jack Girl coming in hot and beating me to the link. Fantastic. So I wanted to round out the AMA. So we've got about 10 minutes left. And we got a bunch of questions just kind of about like next steps, right? So I think to kick this off, Inunmai asks, what are the pitfalls of not getting this right? E.g., identifiability, authentication, challenges in the open metaverse. They said, I feel like this wasn't addressed too much in the paper, but we do talk right in the introduction about like, getting identity right will be incredibly important for laying out, how we interact in the future metaverse. So what are sort of some of the pitfalls that we could go into here, and what's at stake right now, Mario?
So my fear is not nailing privacy well, and that's why we started with that. And I think the biggest issue, and I'll use one example. So up until recently, every single piece of data was mostly controlled by big tech, right? And then the decentralized movement appeared, and it's fascinating how impressive the technology is, and kind of like this notion of democratizing a lot of spaces. But a lot of these things actually backfired because we went from having big tech with all the data to then publishing it completely on chain for everyone to see. I don't really think that was a net win for many people. So we kind of need to swing the pendulum the other way and be like, okay, so we kind of have this notion of democratizing these different fields, but let's bring data back to us. So that would be, and that's why we started essentially privacy first. So, and I would even divide it in identifiability and authentication. So we pretty much nailed authentication, and we go over a lot, like different authentication mechanisms, and those are a bit orthogonal to how you identify people. But the identifiability part is probably the most concerning, because on the authentication side, it's mostly just using very well-established cryptography. So there's only so much that can go wrong there. It's usually more on the development side that things can actually go wrong. But the identifiability is the big issue. And we, although don't really cover that in the paper because we just want to kind of like cover the space and not so much these mini pitfalls, but this may have serious repercussions, and I think that's what people should focus on a lot, and we do.
Great. Alchemist19 asks, are we going to create the black sun on LAMINA1? I honestly think it would be a great sandbox to test some of these ideas out.
So this is a very fun question, and I'm not sure if Alchemist is listening, but if he is, I would be super open to actually having this little sandbox project. It would be a very fun kind of like retrial of the old school ideas from Neil, and then bringing them to the L1 ecosystem.
Yeah, couldn't leave that one out. We were definitely nerding out about this yesterday when I brought up the question. So yeah, shout out to Alchemist19. That's an amazing idea for sandboxing. And then finally, lots of community members are asking, what's the next white paper or light paper that LAMINA1 is going to be working on? We got a bunch of questions of people sort of speculating, is it going to be tokenomics, AI? Are we going to be planning improvements on this light paper and turning it into a white paper? What's next sort of on our publication agenda for the community?
We have so much, Casey, that I wouldn't even know where to start. I will say at least that you will be getting a very nice extension to identity. So that is probably the most relevant for the people in this specific identity AMA that you will be hearing on other different topics. And I think up next, you would also have tokenomics there.
Yeah, we definitely we've had a couple of meetings where we're like, yeah, we got to get this on the publication roster. So for everyone asking about tokenomics, I will say soon in all caps. And then finally, Vamp OG, and actually, Will, I'd love to hand this one off to you just pretty quickly, just to round us out for the last 5 minutes of the AMA. But what can the community expect in the sort of like upcoming month or so from LAMINA1 engineering and in terms of like updates and things that we're planning?
Yeah, so I think the next month should be fairly exciting for everyone. We're putting the finishing touches on the new betanet. So here very soon, you should see a migration over to the new betanet. We'll be bringing in the old validators as well as some new cohorts of validators. We're going to be setting up some custom subnets for some of our partners to begin testing on the more stable betanet experience. And then we also have what we think is a much better onboarding experience that we're going to be sharing with you guys in the form of, the initial version of our wallet. So you guys, this should be a wallet that's, much more catered towards the metaverse and experiences in general, rather than traditional Web3 blockchain wallets, which focus a lot on economics and how many tokens or what's your balance in any specific token, or DeFi applications. This should be more about like, what can I do now that I have this Web3 wallet? What experiences can I jump into, and how can I leverage it to explore the metaverse? So that's going to be a project that grows over the next few months, but we're expecting that first version of the wallet to be in your hands within the month. And then, following the release of this identity white paper and the research behind it, we're going to be implementing some introductory and kind of first steps in identity functionality for you guys. I think like a big feature that a lot of the community was asking for was a name service, which is something we're working on building into an identity subnet, as well as some abilities to transact with people outside of the Web3 ecosystem. So for example, maybe being able to send L1 coins to someone's Discord handle or to their Twitter handle, even if they haven't set up a Web3 wallet in the past. So yeah, we're kind of taking steps to start implementing a lot of the stuff that you saw in the white paper, but that'll be an ongoing gradual process as well. But we do have a lot of pretty exciting stuff coming out in this next month.
Yeah, so everybody definitely stay tuned. You'll hear it from me first. Next week, just as a preview, actually, first of all, I'm going to drop the secret code into the channel now. So for all of you code hunters out there, it is dropping now. Be sure to plug that into Zeely for your XP. Next week, just as like kind of a preview of what we're going to be doing, we're going to be conducting another baseline survey. A lot of the questions will probably look similar to folks who've been with us along the way, but we're going to be doing another survey that just basically will help us figure out like, how's the community changed since we first launched testnet? Do we have more builders now? Do we have more creators now? Super interested in figuring out that data. And also just decided this morning actually that we're going to be launching another sign up form for people who want to potentially become validators for BetaNet. So I know that we did a big push earlier this year for testnet, and we're pretty selective in our processes. We're going to be doing the same sort of selection process again, but we've got a new form for people to fill out, just with a couple of more additional credentials that we can use to potentially make more cohorts. So if you're interested in becoming a node runner or a validator for BetaNet, stay tuned for info on that as well. And yeah, as Will said, we've got a bunch of exciting drops ahead of us in the coming weeks. So my biggest recommendation is stay tuned, catch up on quests if you can, and keep an eye on general and announcements for updates. As soon as I can drop all of this amazing stuff that Will's talked about, I will. And we're really looking forward to your feedback and inputs and continued engagement with all of it. So thank you all so much. It's 12 o'clock. We're going to sign off now. I'll post the secret code a couple of more times in the channel just to make sure everyone gets it. We'll also be posting this up on the L1 YouTube later today. But thanks so much for joining. Thanks so much to everyone who submitted a question, and we will catch you again soon. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.